let me introduce the speaker of today. And welcome Dr. Ganesh Kumar, and he is a aquaculture economist working in Mississippi State University. He is, I would say, he's the most one of the very few aquaculture economists who is working specifically in production, aquaculture production. He was an alumni. He is an alumni of Fisheries College, Panangad, and then he went on to did his masters in CIFE, Mumbai. And then after his master's degree, he went on to work with CP Foods and Cargill Foods, and then he moved to United States of America for his master's degree. He did his master's degree in University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. They were one of the research institute doing a lot of catfish research, who were helping catfish farmers in America to have a good production technology. And then he moved on, and then he did the PhD there in that same institute. And then after his PhD, he joined Mississippi State University as assistant research professor. And he's been there and doing a lot of research, production research, especially in the area of catfish. With that, I would turn my mic to Dr. Ganesh. Dr. Ganesh, please.
Thank you, Pratish. Thank you for the nice introduction. In addition to that, me and Pratish were in the same school for some time together, University of Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and we were really lucky to be having a common teacher or mentor under the name of Dr. Carol Engel. So most of these things that you are talking or you are hearing in many of these talks are wisdom or knowledge that is being actually passed on by her. We all consider her as one of the topmost economists in our field, if not even in US agriculture. So with no further ado, let me go ahead into the topic. I'm a production economist or production side economist. So the talk is kind of an unconventional one. I just wanted to clearly tell about certain issues that we see in the common economic literature, which I call as the pitfalls or the honey traps. So just without further ado, let me go into the talk. Hope everybody can see the screen. Pratish?
Yes.
Okay. Have you ever wondered why some of the technologies are really taking off while some of them really fail? For example, antibiotics, chips, Facebook, WD-40. I mean, WD-40 is one technology that failed 39 times before the 40th time was it the successful formula was invented. So technologies fail. In the case of, floppy disk, when we were all doing our masters, floppy disk was the main the hi-fi technology where all the storage can be done. I mean, nowadays nobody even use thumb drives or memory sticks. I mean, it's all in the cloud. So technologies either fail or have to evolve to be in practice or to be adopted by folks or the participants that are supposed to be taking care of it. So that's a very, very common practice, whether it is in science and technology, whether it's in space science, or is it in agriculture, or even in aquaculture. So some of the key determinants of technology adoption is actually productivity, the relative advantage of one technology over the other in producing certain things cheaper or giving some advantage across the other one. The next one is having greater control over production process. This is very, very important in agricultural sector, to have control over production process. The third one is, producers definitely require proof of concept. They want to see that technologies are successful. They want basis of research as a foundation for that. And that's where science or extension agents comes into picture. Degree of risk aversion is an important thing while people adopt technologies. Younger people, wealthier people are usually found out to be, not much risk averse, while older people and capitally less intensive folks are risk averse in adopting certain good technologies. So it's just because certain technologies are there and they are cost effective, that doesn't mean that it is going to be adopted. One of the biggest reason in adoption of technologies is in farming or in aquaculture is the scale of operation, what economists typically call as economies of scale. The larger, bigger firms tend to adopt technologies pretty faster. The modern technologies, the more productive technologies, the capital intensive technologies, much faster than a smaller firm. That is a typical phenomena. It's a well understood phenomena in economics. It's called as the economies of scale. And also, depending upon production goals, certain firms wants to maximize revenue rather than maximizing profit. And in that particular case, they wanted to have very, very high volume producing certain technologies, just like RAS or just like what do you call biofloc technologies or something. I mean, in those kind of cases, they're trying to definitely trying to maximize the revenue rather than maximizing the profit. There are certain fundamental goals of that business behind it. Probably it is to cut the competitor or just to have some volume production within the market so that they can take care of it. So these kinds of adoptional trends are there in agriculture as well as in aquaculture. Of lately, some of my research is actually looking into the characteristics of the adopters, what are certain fundamental factors underlying aquaculture technology adoptions. These are some of the papers that we had in recent times. One of the fundamental things that we saw that farmers do not adopt just because merely the technologies are superior and they are available. They do not do so. There are multiple complex factors associated with the cultural setting where they are coming in, the homogeneity of the farmers, proof of concept, profitability. Profitability is just one part of it. So there are several other factors that are undermining the adoption of technologies in nature. So given all these things, I'm not discounting that aquaculture is, everybody talks about aquaculture being the fastest growing animal in the industry. Yes, it is one of the fastest growing animal industry with about 6 to 8% annual growth globally. And there is bright future, there is no doubt. There is increasing need for protein and all those things, and there is money to be made. But those businesses who are making money are doing certain good job. Aquaculture is very, very taxing, and it's one of the few agricultural operation that is 24 hours. And if there is an hour extra in a day, that will also be utilized. It's 24/7 operation, and it requires a lot of planning and preparation. And most of the successful businesses juggle a lot, and they plan a lot, and they have very good records. And that's where economics comes into picture. It's really study of scarce resources, allocation of scarce resources, and good firms, successful aquacultural firms are doing proper allocation of their scarce resource, and they understand that particular fact. I mentioned about Dr. Carol Engel, at least 2 or 3 economists that are there in this group definitely know her. I'll call out on Shraddha, and I'll call out on Pratish, who knows Dr. Carol Engel very well. She's probably the best economist that I have seen, who clearly understood the difficulties of production side economics, and try to bridge up the gap between the production and the demand side. And she has, if you look at the broad spectrum of books that she has written, she has encircled both of them. And she has recently made an editorial call saying there is greater need of hybridizing aquaculture and economics. Most of the biologists in aquaculture field have a tendency of calling economists as social scientists. And yes, they are calling at least scientists, but at the same time, giving them a separate aura and giving them not the biologist vision to that. So in typicality, a good economist who is working in agricultural field are biologists too, but their approach is kind of bit different from a typical biologist in nature. Biologists have an inductive theory behind it. That means they formulate theories. They try to work their approach, their results based on that theoretical foundation. But at the same time, the economist comes from a different perspective. They usually don't try to invent a new, especially in production side research. The theories are all there, right from 1940s, 1930s. Most of the fundamental theories are already well formulated. So economists comes from a deductive approach, so their thinking is in a bit different. So they try to apply theories and formulate research findings based on that deductive nature or already theory approach theories. So there may be some conflicts whenever we try to hybridize that, and there is increasing need. The first understanding is we have to make sure that there is hybridization between aquaculture biologists and economists. Economists are usually called at the last minute to prepare an economic analysis, and most of the time that information is not good enough, or that information is not enough to provide a concrete answer to the policymaker. So I'll encourage all the biologists to incorporate economic thoughts or economic folks into your research. The most important thing to understand is every output nowadays require a dollar figure or a currency figure to their output. So the importance of economics is actually going up, especially in the field of aquaculture. But at the same time, if you look at many of the research findings or research publications, you seldom see researchers publishing results that are negative, in the sense like non-profitable ventures. Most of the published budgets, at least in the United States or in Europe, are all very glorified. It's like positive trends, profits skyrocketing, especially in aquaculture. This is very, very optimistic from my perspective. The reason to that is many of these budgets that are showing very glorified profits doesn't even have a sector attained to them. The technologies are most of the time failing, as well as the species are not getting successful. So only a few of those new ventures are very, very successful or fruitful in nature. So what I'm saying is the cream idea behind this talk. When there are 100 technologies, only one of them is a real success, because 99 of them are going to fail. So that is pretty much the common trend in US or in UK or in Asia, because only successful people require a lot of risk taking, and many of them cannot go through those. But that is not reflected really in economic literature as well as in aquaculture. The fundamental reasons that we are going is because we are talking is actually because of certain misuse of these key economic concepts. So we will be going, some of this can be termed as misuse or misunderstanding, or sometimes people make error, but there are a large number of cases where there are deliberate omissions of cost and concepts to make certain things very profitable. So these are some of the things that I'm going to discuss in detail. The first and the most important thing probably is maximization, the concept of maximization of profit. We always talk about revenue and profit as synonyms. They are not. I always talk to my students. They might have been bored after hearing all this talk about revenue and profit. Yes, it's very, very fundamental. People often, or producers often, or even biologists often believe that the more you produce, the greater the profit. It is not so. The fundamental difference is coming because of law of diminishing marginal utility. If you continuously produce higher volumes, that doesn't mean that you're maximizing the profit. The profit maximization happens at one particular point. At this region, yes, there is profit all over, but the fundamental point or the production volume at which you're maximizing your profit is only at this point. That is the Q star. That is when the difference between your total cost and the total revenue is highest and positive. Okay, so the total revenue minus total cost, that is the profit, is maximized. So that particular thing is a little more difficult to understand from this curve than this curve. The concept is marginal cost. The marginal cost is the additional cost incurred in producing 1 unit of your output, which is the fish in this case. And the marginal revenue is the additional price that you're going, which is obviously the price, the additional unit price that you derive from selling 1 unit of your fish, which is once again the price of the fish. So when the marginal cost is equal to the fish price, that's where the profit is maximized. The volume at which, the quantity at which your marginal cost is equivalent to the price of the fish is the key point that you have to remember. Most of the producers are actually rational profit maximizers. There are a few guys, big time retailers who wants to sell large volumes, a monopoly people. People who are only having 1 or 2 competitors. They always cutthroat policies. Very, very rarely in aquaculture too. But what I'm saying is most of the folks, or most of the producers are actually trying, at least they are thinking they are trying to maximize the profit, but at the same time, they try to maximize the volume. So only when you are in a business, you understand this concept. It's very difficult to draw that in a business perspective. You have to understand what is your production volumes and also to understand the profit maximizing level of output. You have to think that from the profit maximizing level of input to, that depends upon the productivity of that particular input. For example, let's say the example of feed. Feed is a key input in many of the aquaculture production. So the marginal revenue product of that particular input is very, very key. And that is very related to its price, because the marginal productivity, the additional benefit that you're getting because of additional 1 unit of production, that is the fish times the fish price, gives you the price of that input. So when you take that ratio, that gives the marginal productivity. The key thing to understand is the marginal productivity of an input is usually the price ratio. What it really tells you is that usually economize or rationalize your costliest input. That means in many of the feed-fed aquaculture, it is the feed. Feed is the most expensive ingredient, followed by fingerling and labor and energy. So as the costliest input, based on that price ratio and based on that marginal productivity, you find that the most costliest input needs to be rationalized first to have better profit maximizing level of inferences. So that's very, very key. What does this mean to a producer? Really, he is not understanding where is the production level. The key understanding that when the feed price goes up, I don't know, many of you might be knowing it all across the world. The demand for soybean and corn is going up because China is buying a lot of corn and soybean for fattening up their swine industry, because they were severely hit by viral outbreaks. So they're trying to bring up and book up several of the soybean and corn that is being used in many other industries, including aquaculture, which is driving the price of feed up. I believe this is very much common in Eastern Hemisphere as well as in Western Hemisphere. So what typically happens is when the price of the feed goes up, which is a key input ingredient, the profit maximizing level of output, that is the fish production, actually goes down. What does that mean? When the feed price goes up, you have to stock less, you have to feed less. Just the opposite is when the price of the fish goes up. If some supply shocks comes in and lesser shrimp is being produced, the profit maximizing level for a producer, a shrimp farmer, is to produce more because the MR just went up, the marginal revenue, the price of that output went up, or the outlook for that particular shrimp price is very high. So you have to increase your intensity, you have to feed more and produce more. So this is what producer understand. This is the language of the producer. We scientists have to bridge both and understand both of that. So the second key concept that is misunderstood is some of the key cost concept. Enterprise budget is one of the most widely used tool for finding out economic benefit, comparative analysis, relative production performances. Enterprise budget is a common tool that lists all the cost and then compare it with the revenue that is generated by a firm or a particular unit of production, and you see whether that is profitable or not. But many of the enterprise budgets is actually prepared on paper. So many of the scientists who are preparing has huge devotion and positive outlook because they have put up 10 to 15 years of their research in particular technology. So they want to see that that particular technology is having a great outlook, and the only way is to say that this is greatly profitable. So that is some misuse of enterprise budget. And usually in most of the cases, such products, as Dr. Engel calls, is wishful enterprise budget. Another misuse of enterprise budget, either deliberate or non-deliberate, is the lack of understanding between economic profit and accounting profit. Accountants, which are the most common source of preparing your tax, most of the businesses do account for taxes, and they have to prepare tax. And because of the complexity in any aquaculture businesses, they usually go in for an accountant, at least in the Western Hemisphere. And in many of the cases in Asian countries too, as the business gets more complex, they produce more volume, they tend to take the help of an accountant. And accountant does not look for economic profit. He does not look for many of the implicit cost. So when you deduct that implicit cost out, the economic profit is much more. The real profit is going to be much smaller. So it's a big difference between. Sometimes it becomes big difference between accounting profit and an economic profit. So the second key concept that is misused is the cost concept. So as I said, enterprise budget really gives you a bottom line that is called the net returns or the profit, which is the difference between revenue and cost. In cost, you have to sum up all the variable cost, that is typically called as the operating cost, and also the fixed cost, which is also called as the ownership cost. The fixed cost is very tricky. Fixed cost includes a little bit more calculation. Many of the farmers know their variable cost off the top. They understand all those concepts, but the fixed cost is a bit more difficult. You have to list all your equipments that you're using. You have to find out a useful life, which you probably may not be knowing. So putting up a useful life, find out the depreciation associated with it, anticipate a lot more cost associated with planning. All those things needs to be put in when you're creating fixed cost calculations. So enterprise budget is a careful tool, and when industries are established, as like in catfish, we are very lucky that we are working the economics of a very established industry where standard enterprise budgets are already there. Economic analysis were done right from the 1970s. So we are really lucky not to reinvent all those things because the skeleton is already in there. So errors in catfish is very, very less. You won't see much of false enterprise budget in channel catfish industry in the United States, because there are some strong economists, less me. Another common thing that economists do is when they don't have enterprise budget, they try to engineer one. I mean, there's nothing wrong in it. I mean, not everybody can do an enterprise budget calculation based on their survey, because surveys are very expensive, very time consuming, and very laborious. And it depends upon the person who is doing the survey. So survey data are not often available. So we have to underline certain key variables that are very different in each of those study, and extrapolate the available um, enterprise budget to create new enterprise budget. That's what is called as economic engineering technique. So it's not the bad engineering that we typically call about. So, but it involves a lot of assumptions, and it involves extrapolation of experimental data or experimental commercial finding to a larger commercial scale. So we need to be very, very careful. Most of the time, the research that you do in a wet lab or in a small production pond or in a demonstration farm may not be as truistic what that is going to happen in a real commercial setting, because the control is less there, and often the less controlled commercial production falls short than a research finding. So we always want to make sure that you're accounting for all those variations. When you're using the yield, you have to use the average of the yield. You have to use the average of the prices rather than just the highest price. This is very, very common. Calling shrimp enterprises, putting $15 to a pound when the actual retail price of shrimp is just $5 per pound. So that's a big problem, because there may be $15 in a very niche market down there in Singapore or in Indiana, where you get higher prices for very small volumes. But that doesn't mean that you can produce large amount of volume anticipating a $15 price. And your enterprise budget, which is based on an economic engineering, can give you false estimates of profit or wrong estimates of cost. So that's one important thing. Another important thing that economists comes to do with biologists is, coming at the last minute and trying to do an economic analysis of nutritional benefit, or in some cases, biological inferences of production systems. The question is mostly a statistical question. You should not do economic analysis when there is no statistical difference between treatment means. When the production or the yield kilogram per hectare of one feed versus the next feed is no different, you should not account that particular variable in the economic calculations. That's very, very important to understand. And another important thing to understand is you should not do a stat on the economic numbers. You may be contradicted, but what I'm saying is you don't do statistics on the final numbers. You do statistics before that. You do the statistics on the production numbers and then come up with the economic analysis, and don't try to do a statistics on the final numbers. That's very, very important to know. So when there is no treatment difference between diet 1 and diet 2, you don't use the nominal differences of 50 kilogram per hectare into your economic analysis. 95% of the time, you found out that there is no statistical difference. If you are replicating this result again, 95% of the time, the results said that this is going to be non-difference. Then how are you going to use that nominal difference in your economic analysis? There should not be an economic analysis when there is no statistical difference. So that's the main thing. So in that particular case, the cheaper feed will win. Same is the case with HCR. That's very common. When there's no statistical difference, further information, just think one more time. The FCR is just an efficiency ratio, and it just tells you how efficiently that fish converted. That doesn't mean how much feed was actually used. So you have to really just don't account a feed conversion ratio calculation. You have to account for the total feed that was actually used in the diet, in that diet treatment. So use the diet quantity that is used between the diet 1 and diet 2 before doing an economic analysis. So it's really a statistical question. Another commonly found issue with economic analysis is missing cost, or what we call, or what I call, is ghost cost. Cost of construction, earthwork construction cost, pond renovation, and the associated one-time labor cost associated with it. Huge numbers that are missing. Repair and maintenance costs that are associated typically in the production. The need for backup equipments, some of the fixed costs like permits, insurances, and legal cost, interest cost, both on the operating side as well as on the fixed side, and some of the opportunity cost. When I talk about opportunity, I go a lot, but I try to stick on. Everything that we do have an opportunity cost. It's the cost of the next best alternative that you have forgone. So forgetting opportunity cost will give you false profit. There is no doubt about it. All the 4 factors of production, land, labor, capital, and management, does have opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of land, you have to incur, you have to put the labor, the land cost, even if your land is owned by you 100% without any loan or anything, because unless and until you don't account for that lease cost or the rent cost to your land, you better be doing something else. If you don't account for that particular cost and not get a profit above that rental cost, you're not doing justice to that land or that factor of production. That is the key. The same is the case with labor and management. Many of the small businesses, including many of the aquaculture businesses, do part-time jobs. So unless and until you are thinking about getting into aquaculture completely by foregoing something, a school teacher job, you have to make profit above that school teacher's salary. That is the key to understand. So put that salary that you're foregoing as a cost into your budget to make sure you're making profit above that particular cost. So that is called the opportunity cost. Depreciation, things wear out by use and time. That is very, very important, and it's variable. Some of the equipment can wear out in just a year, while some equipment can actually stay there for years. Ponds are something that people can't realize as a depreciating asset. Land does not, but pond depreciates. So you need to put a life to the pond in which you are actually culturing. So you need to assign depreciation. If you don't appropriate depreciation as an annual cost in your budget, what happens is when it really requires renovation, when it really requires replacement of an equipment, you will not have money because you are all having a pseudo profit in the earlier years before the useful life of this product. So use very practical, useful life or years of useful life. That means if a aerator is 4 years in life, make sure that that is what you're putting, or even 3 years of useful life. Many of the tax purposes, really for tax purposes, the depreciation schedule are overhyped in the sense they wanted to show very high depreciation. So typically a tractor would be depreciating in 3 years in a tax purpose, for tax purpose, but you don't want that. I mean, typically a tractor can be brought in for 15 or 20 years if it is maintained properly. So use that practical, useful life of that product in finding depreciation. Lack of accounting of all costs will definitely lead into pseudo profit and lead into failures of aquaculture business, and we have seen a lot of them. So correct accounting of cost will give correct structures of net returns. As you see, there is economies of scale in clear, that is the profit of certain strategies are found out to be higher on larger farms rather than on smaller farms. This is farm size 60 acre versus a 1,000 acre farm. This is Dr. Carol Engel's one of the earlier budgets. It shows that when you account for all cost, that means including the risk, economic risk of opportunity cost and all, the smaller farms are not sustainable to be in running for longer time. They may be able to survive shorter term economic instabilities, but in the long run, they are not able to be account for every cost and make profit about it. But the larger farms are able to do so. So this is a correct way of accounting. Net returns above risk, net returns above labor and management, and also above cash cost. So those are three different matrices which are under three different level of risk aversion. Then another important concept that everybody try to understand is the time value of money. Time value of money is very important, especially in aquaculture, because many of those investments are meant for years. You know, all the RASs or the recirculatory aquaculture ventures that are coming in mostly are meant for 10 or 15 years. So if you don't account for the time value of money and discount your future profits, it is not going to make much of a sense of making that investment above the other ones. So there are certain key concepts within the time value of money or the investment feasibility. One of the most easily understood one is the payback period. Payback period means how many years it will take me to pay back that money without accounting for the time value of money. So it's a simple way of farmers understanding, while net present value, which also gives you an idea about the rate of returns, is actually used by discounting the future values by a particular discount rate. And when you put in a discount rate, you need to be very, very careful. Discount rates are actually the best way of accounting for discount rates are the opportunity cost of capital. So what is $1 worth your money right now when you are investing somewhere else? So typically in Western countries, it is closer to about 10%. That means $1 is going to get you at least 10 cents more a year. So that is the minimum amount of interest rate or discounting rate that you should use to devalue your future profits. Do you think what will be the discount rates in developing countries like India? Is it lower or higher? Usually it is higher because countries like India, Brazil, Thailand, those are all aquaculture countries too. They have very high opportunity for each of those investment. So you should put much higher discount rates when calculating your future returns, actual returns. So cash flow is another important concept that you need to understand. Many of the students can't understand this thing because they haven't seen a business reality. It is not an annual thing. It is a monthly or it's a daily thing. So cash comes in and comes out of the business on a daily, on an hourly scale. Bills have to be paid, but the production, you know, the fish may not be ready, but the operating capital is constantly in need. So cash flow is very, very important to be liquid, and to be liquid is a very, very fundamental thing. Profitable businesses can fail just because of cash flow issues, and cash flow is one of the major thing in aquaculture, given this longer production schedule, especially with finfish. It's not very easy to just turn around and make product into cash. So it takes at least 10 months, at least 12 months, at least 18 months. And in case of catfish and salmon, it's more than 2 years. So that cash flow leads to certain inefficient, or cash flow issues leads them to make certain inefficient strategies within production systems, typically multiple batch systems. That is very common in catfish, where continuous production is happening from a pond year round, just to make sure that you are getting cash flow. So for that, you have to have market size and sub-market size, which is a very inefficient way if you look at it. But the fundamental reason for all those things of multiple stocking and multiple harvesting is because farmers want cash. Farmers want cash to come in so that they can pay bills. So it's not that they don't understand this thing. It is just cash flow need. So we have to understand where the farming is coming in. Most of that is actually coming from the business schools. Some large farms can go in with the best production practices, but still they have to generate cash flows. And because of that, they may have certain ponds which are just to keep their cash flow going. So when you see those kind of concept, you don't typically see those in research, and you tend to undermine those kind of issues. The one common thing that is undermined is liquidity and cash flow issues. We have done certain research with the latest research done by our team, including Dr. Engel, looked at the economics of ponds, raceways, and recirculatory aquaculture systems in the United States. We've done several models, 55 different species and production systems were looked into. So it is a very comprehensive thing, and we looked into some of the key cost drivers, and we found out that fixed cost is one of the biggest one. Fixed cost is so variable. Fixed cost is variable. That's what I'm saying. So yes, it is quite variable among different production systems as well as different species, and across different regions too. So that's very fundamental to understand. The greater the proportion of fixed cost, the greater the chance of economies of scale. That means the greater the chance of spreading that fixed cost across greater volumes of production. That means by producing more, you can actually spread or reduce the fixed cost per unit production. So that is one thing. So economies of scale is bound to happen in any of these sections because the fixed cost is pretty fairly large. So when you look at relative profitability, which is profits in terms of the revenue that you earned, or typically in accounting terms, it is called as operator profit margin ratio. It means how much of the dollars or how much of the rupee is actually profit that you saw coming into the business. So if you got $100 out of the business, how much of that is actually profit? $100 coming in as revenue, maybe $1 is only profit. So in that particular case, 1% is the relative profitability. So when you look at different strategies, we looked at 3 different scales of production, that is 32 hectare, 124 hectare, and 552 hectares. That clearly shows that there is economies of scale in channel catfish production. There is scale of production, and that is economies of scale were coming just because of larger firms as well as technologies that are producing more volume. So that is key to understand. So volume production as well as scale, I mean, in the sense larger firms also can bring in economic efficiency. So that trend is common in channel catfish, and it's a bit more different, a bit more intensive in hybrid catfish, but economies of scale were clearly visible in our project results across catfish industry. The same economies of scale are there in RAS too, but still on a negative trend. And that means the recirculatory aquaculture systems for trout, salmon, and tilapia, although there is a lot of talk about huge multi-million-dollar investment coming in salmon and all, none of the scales that are existing in the United States is profitable. at whatever scale. Our scales were pretty big. I mean, like 4.5 thousand kilograms per year to 4.5 million kilograms per year. None of them were profitable for any of these three species. That's quite important to understand when you account for all the cost. Some of the technicians, some of the labor, some of the equipment that you require for this RAs are very, very expensive. You need backup generators. So all those things, when you get a perspective of the farmer who is actually doing it and accounting for all those costs, it is not relatively profitable. That's the key thing to understand. Consideration of risk is very, very important. Most of the aquaculture as well as agricultural practices are intensifying, and there is reason for intensification. And the intensification reason is spreading probably of all the fixed costs, taking advantage of economies of scale. That doesn't mean that every time you're going to be successful. So this huge risk also need to be considered. So the risk in intensification is your break-even yield. Your break-even yield, that means the amount of fish that you require to produce or amount of shrimp that you require to produce to cover all your cost, including the variable cost and the fixed cost, automatically is going a touch notch higher now. So you need to produce a bit more when you're intensifying to cover all your cost, so that production system or the species that you're thinking for intensified operating practices needs to make sure that it is covering for all those costs. There is greater financial operational risk involved. There is a lot more money that is needed. Feed, electricity, labor, those are all key input that goes up along with the intensification. So managing your key, as I said, the rationalizing the most expensive inputs are very, very important, and in mitigating those risks, those financial risk. If you are involved in the business of advising the farms, be very, very, very careful. The first thing to have a business to be in a successful path is to have a sound business plan. There are free templates of sound business plans that you can tell them to make. Those business plans for even existing businesses needs to be soundly reformulated every 6 months or every year to be successful, to see that they are taking advantage of the changing dynamic conditions in the markets. I mean, this is very much true in a shrimp farm that is established or a catfish farm that has been there for 40 years. So many of those farms are having their business plan, not in paper, but in their mind, or because of their experience they may be having. But it's better to have that in paper, so that when you have some liquidity crisis, you can bring in and show the success of the business in paper to the bank who is actually going to lend you. So lending perspective is very, very important in future aquaculture businesses because of the intensification in itself. So periodic updates are needed, and robust planning of all the financial documents is needed. Make sure your business is actually cash flowing, and that's very key rather than just the profit alone. Some of the important conclusions that I really want to make. The first one is to make sure that you understand the difference between revenue maximization and profit maximization. I talk this thing a lot just because those two are revenue maximization volumes are much higher than the profit maximization. It's pretty much the same concept of maximum sustainable yield versus maximum economic yield. If you are continuously putting inputs to regulate a fishery based on maximum sustainable yield, yeah, it is supposed to be bound for some crashing in the long run. That's pretty much the same case in economics of any firms too. So profit maximization is mostly the rationale behind many of the producers. So understand that just by producing greater volumes, you are not making the profit. The concept is to understand, concept is to get the best profit or the maximum profit that you can get from your business. Profit above owner's risk will require accounting for all cost. That includes non-cash cost like the depreciation and also the opportunity cost of labor, land, management, and any other things that you're foregoing. Watch out for those glorified budgets that I was talking about. Take it with a pinch of salt, even if it is a budget that is coming out from my hand or from my make sure when you are engineering it, engineer it to a conservative standards of what you think is correct. Make sure those conservative estimates are being used. Every budget may not have that things, especially for species that are new coming in, species that are coming in new, production systems that are new. I've seen some production enterprise budget with absolute no regard to fixed cost and saying that an Indian farmer who is going into a biofloc technology is going to get 150% rate of returns. And this thing happened in my state of Kerala under certified government employees who are encouraging farmers to go into biofloc technology. And I really felt ashamed when I saw that there was no account for fixed cost in those estimates. And if you just think that there is no fixed cost in any of the businesses that include plastic tanks, a large number of them, and a large number of wiring that is required, at least a couple of generators, that is misfortune that we are seeing. So I won't say that it is just error. It is just to glorify the profit. And what is the end result? You need your stakeholders to be successful, and especially in government endeavors, that is what is really wanted. You don't want to glorify your budgets. I don't see any aquaculture venture that is 100% rate of returns. That means for every dollar that you're putting into your asset, you're ready to make another same asset in the next year. It's very, very difficult. It's not very easy. Otherwise, all the Warren Buffetts will be pouring money into aquaculture. They did in the 70s and 80s into shrimp and all. Liptons and Tatas were all there in shrimp farming. But there are limits to everything. So watch out for those glorified budgets talking about salmon and shrimp and tilapias. Just take it with a pinch of salt. Future profits needs to be discounted, and that is every dollar will not buy the same amount or value of things next year, because value of money goes down as time goes on. So you need to properly discount your future profits. And also update your business plan very, very periodically. If you are a farmer or if you're advising a farmer, you need to make sure that you are at least in that perspective. And as a producer, as a researcher, you have to advise the producer to monitor the cost on a very ongoing basis. It changes, booking price of feed changes on a daily price, on a daily basis. So you need to make sure that you are monitoring or allocating your capital that is most important for production and monitor those costs on an ongoing basis. Remember, all what you can sell is more important than all what you can produce. In aquaculture, that is very, very important, because our storability of that particular product is very, very less compared to corn or soybean over here. So all you can sell is the motto, than all you can produce. If you can sell all you can produce, that's great. That's a different concept. So profit maximization and revenue maximization, all those concepts are very, very new for biologists, but it's a very fundamentally thorough thing that is being used in agriculture economics for several years, yet not fruitfully used in aquaculture, because probably economics is a new field. Thank you very much. Myself, once again, I work for Mississippi State, and if you have any contacts that are needed, my email address as well as the phone number is listed below. You can contact me anytime. Give me a couple of days to get back to you. That's all. Thank you. Pratish?
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. That was an excellent talk, and I feel like I've been sitting in Dr. Engel's class. Some of those, and most of the things that you said was like was I feel most of the time like when we discuss, we talk about all these things, and thank you for sharing with all of them, and for all the listeners. And he and Dr. Engel is one of the inspiration that I continue education in economics, and I've been here, and I'm grateful that I've been part of they were in my part of my life actually. So thank you so much for everything. And it's a very personal note. When I plan to come to United States, me and my wife, he and Dr. Suja, they both were like all along with us to make sure that we got settled there. So that's just a personal note, but thank you again. Thank you all for all the listeners who have joined today for the talk as well. So before going to the discussion or leave the party, I would ask everyone to click the link that I'm gonna put in the chat section. This is a feedback form that we ask all the listeners to give a feedback about the speech that you attended, and also to give a feedback on like what kind of topic that you guys like in future, all those details. So please go ahead and take 5 minutes of your time, and then give us a feedback. So that would be grateful for us. And I would also like to announce, if anyone is happy to volunteer for our AFS talk, please do let us know, and let us know, like in what form that you can help us for continuing contributing to AFS Talk, and that will be really, really helpful. So please don't hesitate to contact us and discuss the value that you guys can bring in. So with that, here is the feedback form that I just put it in the chat box. Please go ahead and take a look at it. And so now we are moving on to the discussion part. So if you guys have any questions to Dr. Ganesh, and you guys can please unmute yourself and then ask questions right now. I have seen some of the comments in the chat box. Mukta, Krishna, Komal, Deepali, Maureen, and Anil, they're all said, it was a wonderful talk, a great job. And is it possible, Maureen is asking, is it possible for us to get a copy of the presentation or recording? We have a policy of publishing the presentation once we get a consent from the speaker. So if Ganesh is okay, then we will provide the copy in our WhatsApp group, and also in our Facebook page, most probably after 2 weeks from this presentation. So yes, we will be providing. Dr. Kumar, I have you said one of the questions that I was planning to ask about was the biofloc, and all these this glorification that they are giving this biofloc, especially in India in recent years. Thanks for telling that. And again, connected to that, aquaponics is another field that everyone is kind of like coming out with. Can you comment on the profitability of aquaponics in from this profitability scenario and this cost concept scenario? Yeah, please comment on that.
Ratish, I know you raised up another sugar storm in a cup, I guess. It's pretty much once again, any business that is involved with dealing with a fish that is going to be high value. I think aquaponics require fish that is of high value. Otherwise, it just becomes a hydroponics. So hydroponic ventures are really successful. Just don't get me wrong. I mean, you can sell your vegetables at a higher premium price. especially you are in a very urban setting, a liberal background down there, just like cities in Austin. You are from very near to Austin, so there is a large number of hydroponic ventures down there. But if you want to have aquaponic ventures, you definitely make sure you are trying in something with a high value fish that is having a possibility of a niche marketing environment. You can sell small volumes and at least cover the fish cost of the hydroponic system or the aquaponics system. So the fixed cost components are much higher in aquaponics, because you are unable to take care of the volume production, because it is mostly attained to a niche market. The settings are usually separated. That means the fish component and the plant component are completely segregated in many cases. To have greater control, that adds up more cost of filtering things, recirculating things. So that adds up a lot more cost. And I think the only person who can really comment on the profitability of aquaculture, aquaponics from a research perspective, is probably Carol Engel. She has made some general comments about it and found out that there is not a single aquaponics venture as far as of 2016, commercially successful aquaponics venture. But yet, you're right, all these new technologies that get a lot of attention, when you see in reality, in paper, as well as in front of us, that the successful ventures, the successful volumes are still coming out from pond production across the world, whether it is United States or whether it is carp farming in India or in Thailand, or shrimp farming in Thailand. It is the pond production that is creating the volume. And the fundamental thing is economies of scale. You are actually producing greater volumes that cover for your fixed cost. And fixed cost may be a smaller component to your total budget, but it makes a big difference. And aquaponics is probably one among them.
Yeah. Thank you. Any questions for Dr. Ganesh?
Am I audible, Ganesh?
Yes, Mukta.
Yeah, hi. Great talk. I enjoyed it really. So I don't know if it's a question, I don't know if it's a dumb question, but people develop aquaculture technologies in an experimental setup, right? A biologist. And often what happens is at the end of this thing, they just catch upon an economist and tell him or her, key, just work out the economics for this thing. And it ends up either being a very healthy, it's a new technology, so obviously you want to show something healthy. So, but somehow it doesn't get translated into, like you said, into the field or acceptance, even though on paper it looks nice. So how would you suggest like changing that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, how do you go about, as an economist, how do you go about, trying to popularize the technology? I don't know. I mean, some thoughts.
Yes, Mukta, that's a very pertinent question. One of the key changes that I saw when I was a student and now I am as a professor is how, let's say, I'm giving you an answer in a very different perspective, but maybe it's from the funding agencies that are funding all this research in modern era, like in the last 10 years. The funding agencies are actually telling that you better have your economist as a team member in many of your biological research to make sense of your economic numbers that you're presenting. So what they are saying, in Western countries, is to incorporate an economist right from the start, make your research proposal right from the start, so that you make inferences under correct experimental. Yeah, the statisticians is good enough to make sure that, or probably a biologist will be good enough to make your experimental settings are done. But is that experimental setup really going to give you a good economic perspective, whether that results can be extended on a commercial scale? Yeah, many of the wet lab results, when you are extrapolating, you need to experiment that one more time outside in a less controlled environment before pushing it to it. A sensible economist will always say about that. Your wet lab, your aquaria results should not be brought straight into a 1 acre or a 2 acre farmer's biofloc technology. It's a completely different environment out there at the commercial sector. So that's where I think even if you incorporate an economist, that may not be enough. I think before extrapolating, I think we have a big role in making sure that if you can demonstrate within our experimental set on a larger scale, in a less controlled environment, you have better chance of adopting things.
Right. Yeah. Right. Great. Thanks. Thank you.
Mukta, that was a great question, actually. Here is a good question to Ganesh.
Yeah.
So this is about opportunity cost. So can you hear me, Ganesh?
Yes.
Yeah. Please.
Okay. So let's think about like an expert barber or tailor or somebody. So he might be actually including his salary as a cost before getting into the profit section or whatever. So that is the best he can do in realistic terms, to include his salary in there. The next best thing that he might be foregoing, while if he is sitting idle, maybe like he is avoiding gambling or something. So how can you give like a range for this opportunity cost? Maybe that's why there is kind of like a problem. Or if we are telling that we are okay, if I am not a barber, I'll be teaching somebody and I'll be getting like $25,000 or $30,000. And in addition to that, he is actually showing his salary in there. So isn't it kind of like a doubling effect, which is undermining the profit?
Right.
And so that is my question to Ganesh.
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'll say that one thing. Opportunity cost of salary is really opportunity cost of labor and management together, right? So when you are in a business, you are working for yourself as an employee as well as the manager. So the salary that you have foregone is together. I mean, the salary put together is the opportunity cost of labor and management. Okay, so if you're a school teacher, if you're foregoing something, I mean, if you're foregoing that particular job and getting into an aquaculture business, you better put that salary in there. That opportunity varies from people to people. Even if you are having a salary, I just picked salary, the best thing that you're foregoing, the best thing for a barber, I'm not undercounting barber. That's why my hair is too hard. I mean, I value barber very high now. So that opportunity cost for that person who is getting into is completely different for individual perspective. The opportunity cost of getting into aquaculture business for Pratish is different, Mukta is different, Suja is different, and myself is different. My opportunity cost will be the highest, no doubt, because I'm so scared to get into that business. It's very, very risky. So it's going to be very different. The key difference is, as you said, for that barber, he may be putting in. That is very difficult if you are a gambler and if you're losing money by not getting into this one. Yeah, you better put that value in there. You know, it's better not to hype it much, and you're thinking a lot, but at least from the salary is the best way of putting that thing in there. Komal has one question. Most of the time, experimental ventures give huge profit, but when it comes to commercially high level, they fail to give much. Why is it so? I mean, I don't know what is the right answer. Probably the scaling is is an important thing. I don't know whether it is experimental ventures in reality or in research you're talking about. Research is very, very common. When you do a 10th acre pond and then you're talking about 10-acre ponds, it's a completely different thing. So when you're extrapolating hydroponics or aquaponic ventures in a very, very small meter square experimental setup, and then you're talking about, what Pradesh, I mean, big scale aquaponic production, that may not be fruitful. So in US, this kind of ventures does have certain demonstration extension background. Here, most of the US research setup is run through a land grant system, which is quite different than any other countries. So just because of that, you get a free advice from many of the extension agents. It doesn't mean that all extension agents say correct things, but they will make a genuine effort to get you the best answer. So in most of the cases, when literature and information are available about large scale production, they are able to give you answers. And nowadays, everything is open, so you can actually contact multiple people in multiple regions to get this information as fruitful as you can, so that you can plan. You account for all the what if scenarios. Economists call it as sensitivity analysis. What if my price goes southward? What if my input cost goes up? What if my labor charges are going up because of certain regulations? So you plan for all those things for the scale that you are planning. That is the best way to do that. I don't know whether I answered it, but I'm trying. So another question from Komal. What do you think about current application of economics in aquaculture in India compared to Mississippi? Pratish, I'll bounce that question to you.
What was the question? Kamal, can you put that in the chat for everyone to see the question? That would be great. What was the question again?
What do you think is the current application of economics in aquaculture in India compared to Mississippi?
Well,
the application of economics is, I won't say that there are not good economists in India. It's just the application. India is still the second largest aquaculture producer. But I won't say it's proportionally enough application of economics in aquaculture. US is only the 17th largest aquaculture producer, but we have very good application of economics and economic tools in aquaculture studies or research and extrapolation of that into commercial sectors. Probably it's because of the nature in which agriculture universities are set up, because agriculture economists understand seeing all those things and coming up in a traditional system, while in India and all, it's just started. So there will be budding economists coming up in India who will be doing good economic research in the future.
To add to that, recently when I was talking to, I think it was with Mukta, they started incorporating economics, at least for the namesake, to all the projects. Earlier when we were UG students, economics is not being mentioned, not as heavily as recently. So I guess the application is coming. So maybe 10 years from now, they might be thinking more about economics. Kamal, one of the aspect that I have noticed, I have worked in some of the projects, like aquaculture projects, when I was in India. The one thing that they don't look at is the economics, and most of the time what they do is they jump from one culture practice to the next culture practice. At one time it was mussel culture, and after that, I'm not hearing the name of the mussel culture now. Now there was in between, there was a cobia culture. I don't know what happens with the cobia culture. So it's all because of lack of economic analysis of that culture. And if you if you don't look at those economic analysis in the beginning, you might be ending up like, you might be just like Ganesh was saying, that okay, you can push your business for like at least a couple of years, or maybe like 3 or 4 years, and after that you might be seeing a dead end, and that's something that everyone has to think. And even not like in a farmer level, it should be thinking from a policy level also, like government has to think all these aspects, and then only the farmers will learn. So yeah, it will come, I guess. I'm happy, like I was expecting around like 20 participants this talk, because it was economics, but we got like 40 participants, which is a great thing. Like it's, which I feel like one that people are interested in at least the economic part of the business, and another one, it is probably because Ganesh have made it in a very general way, that not to speak about the true economics, but at least like the common pitfalls that the people use in economic calculation. So that may be attracted people. Ganesh, I have another question.
Go ahead.
What is your so in your talk, one of the main thing that you talk about was the economy of scale. And economy of scale, you said that for a lower farm size, it is really hard for them to maintain the profit. And if you look at the scenario, not the shrimp culture, but for the other fish species, the farm size in India is very small when compared to United States. What's your advice for those farmers? Like, comparing the economic scale that you mentioned and the farm size in India, what kind of advice that you can give to them?
Pratish, even though the scale is relatively small, economies of scale it's a phenomena everywhere. A 1 acre farmer will be having a tougher problem than a 5 acre farmer or a 10 acre farmer in India. The scale is just logarithmically changing over here. That's all. So the average farm for size of a small farmer in catfish industry is close to about 100 acres, while a small shrimp farmer is probably an acre down there. But I think it's just, in economics, you have that production functions and the scaling effects of that. So it's just logarithmic effect of that. But I think the issues are pretty much the same. The smaller farmers in any relative terms is always tougher, because aquaculture is becoming capital intensive. So if you have greater capital, you automatically grow bigger to take advantage, so that you can better utilize your fixed resources. And that's why economies of scale is a common factor everywhere in aquaculture. And even with 1,500 acres in the United States, there's still economies of scale. That means there is further chance of lowering your cost, because there is further chance of better utilizing your fixed resources. That's the key. And I think that is there in aquaculture all around the place. I haven't seen many. I've seen some firms that are too big, that are failing and having diseconomies of scale too. But in most of the cases, economies of scale are present in shrimp, tilapia, salmon, and catfish, everywhere. Yeah. It's a good question. Yeah.
One more question, and then I'll stop. The last sentence of your talk was very important. Like, you said that you need to produce what you can sell than what you can what you can produce, right? So the marketing is a key. That's one of the factor that you said.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So do you see most of the marketing cost is coming up in recent, like the way that you do in catfish industry? Is it coming up, or how you incorporate? Is it coming as a big contribution in the cost structure? That's my question is.
Pratish, in catfish, if you look at, I'm just taking catfish as an example, probably because it's one of the most researched area in aquaculture industry. As far as economics is concerned, you have very good production numbers. Even when you look at catfish, like research and see the enterprise budget, there is no marketing cost. The cost that the farmer is inculcating in selling his product, actually it should come as a production thing, because he is not going into any other level of distribution channel, right? So he is actually producing all his product at farm gate. And of course, any cost that he's incurring at that farm gate level should be coming in as part. So several of the cases, they are members, so members of certain organization, trade organizations. So all those costs needs to be incorporated. But I think once again, that's just adding to the fixed cost component rather than the variable cost. So yes, marketing costs are getting more and more important as people produce more volume, and it's going to be. You can see many generic organizations coming up. You might have heard about the Idaho potatoes generic promotion of milk, like Amul. So these are all examples of great marketing campaigns that came through. So there is Catfish Institute, the TCIs, the Tilapia Institute, the Salmon Association, several Shrimp Farmers Association of the South. So there are several associations coming, and all of that will add up cost on the farmers, but on a good way. Okay. Yeah.
Ganesh, I have one last question, and this is about marketing itself. So in a big country like India, for a new species, when people are producing or when they see that it is getting high market value, how can we know about the marketing costs, especially when we don't have much data about how many different people have started similar kinds of production basing on that particular species?
It's very difficult, really speaking. That's all part of your business planning. We haven't talked much about business plan. One of the first thing that you have to really answer, I mean, one of your question was part of the business planning. How much, who, what, when, where, all those questions, and how much I should produce. It's very difficult when you are going in with a new species, but whatever it is, you find a seller for yourself. It is not very difficult for a shrimp farmer because it's kind of a commodity down there. But if you're going with the specialized species in United States or even in India, you need to be very, very careful about how you can market it. So I don't know about much. Probably some of the extension Krishi Vidyan Kendras can give you some insights. Contact certain good institutes before going in. Probably out of the 10 people, one person may be able to give you the correct lead and some help in finding out certain marketing cost and market volumes that are associated with that project. I have no idea how to go about with this, really answer. It's a tough question.
Suja, as a joke, as an answer to that question, default is send everything to Kerala. No problem. Everything sells, everything is eaten, so no worries.
I guess that's it, and I didn't see any more questions on the chat section. And if any of you have any questions, it's a moment that you guys can unmute yourself and then ask question. Okay, and I guess that's it. Thank you, Dr. Kumar, for spending your time with us this early morning for you. And thank you all participants who have came over and listened to this wonderful talk. And we will see you all in the next talk in a couple of weeks. And we'll let you guys know the details of the meeting in our Facebook page. Thank you.